Thank you very much, Ulrich. And it's always really hard to step in after such a beautiful introduction because the Make Science Not War really means a lot to us. Also, just a little shout out to people who are pushing minorities, women into the STEM field. This is really critical to Merck, and Merck is doing a lot of work in that space, so I want to call that out before I start. My name is Julien Saint-Andrieux. I'm the head of editorial operations for Merck. So I'm one of the communication leaders in this company, and I'm very happy to be leading this panel for this very special event here with all of you today. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. This is going to be an interactive session. I will, of course, walk the panelists through a number of questions that we have prepared beforehand, but we want this to be a lively conversation. Talking about which, a lot of ground to cover. I mean, AI in drug discovery is really one of the hot topics right now. Role of AI in protein design and protein structure prediction, AI-driven drug discovery process overall, how can AI predict the dynamic behavior of proteins, personalized medicine and precision drug design, ethics, regulation, economics, a lot of aspects that we're going to cover today. So I'd like to ask our panelists to join me on stage, starting with Rodrigo Barnes, Chief Technology Officer with Owkin. Our next speaker is Elsi-Mari Borrelli, Head of Partnerships at Algorithmiq. Tim Guilliams, co-founder and CEO of Healx. I hope I pronounced it right. Elise de Reus, co-founder of Cradle. And our very own Gerit Brandenburg, Director for Digital Chemistry at Merck Group. Welcome, everyone. So, biographies of all the speakers are online with a lot of details about what they do, but of course, to create a nice introduction, whenever one of them will get to speak first, I would ask you guys to briefly introduce yourself, what you do, where you come from, and what's keeping you busy right now in the space of AI. Beautiful. Okay, let's jump right in, maybe starting with probably a broad topic on the landscape we're operating in. How do you see AI changing the traditional phases of drug development, discovery, preclinical, clinical trials, and where do you see the most dramatic time and cost saving? Raise your hand if you want to jump in.
I'll jump
Please,
in.
Elise, yes.
So my name is Elise de Reus. I'm a co-founder at Cradle. Cradle is a software platform, a solution that enables biologists who are innovating on proteins to do this more quickly using generative AI. So think of us as a SaaS platform that enables scientists to make a custom generative AI model using their data and their expertise for the project that they need to succeed because they want to bring it into clinical trials. I think AI is accelerating from the early conception of target discovery all the way through to how we manage clinical trials and get therapies to patients faster. At Cradle, we're really focused on the preclinical development phases. And where we see a big opportunity is for scientists to kind of remove some of the stage gates in that canonical drug development process and think about it a little bit more in an integrated way. So for Cradle, that means that if you're developing an antibody molecule and you need it to bind but also be developable and also be efficacious and safe, then you can think of that journey in a hit discovery phase or hit identification phase and followed by a lead optimization phase. But why would you do that if you can train a model right on the screening data from your hit identification campaign and use the learnings in that model to also support the finding a molecule that behaves well and that is developable and that is safe? And I think taking these different considerations into account simultaneously really helps to compress the timeline, and that is something that we're seeing large pharma customers that use the Cradle platform, for example, do very successfully. And I'm curious to hear how that also translates into maybe the field of small molecules or on the other stages of the drug development process.
Who wants to go next or build on that? Please.
Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you. Well, thank you for having us here. So I'm Tim, co-founder and CEO of Healx. We use AI drug discovery for rare genetic diseases. and we do end-to-end. And so to the question, what's keeping us busy right now, where we had first patient dose for a phase 2A clinical trial at the beginning of the year, we should have first patient dose for a phase 1 before the end of the year, and then a third clinical trial next year. And so it's a really exciting time to have spent basically the first 4 years developing technology. My background is I did a PhD at the chemistry department in Cambridge, and there was a lot of omic-based technologies being developed there. And so looking at basically drug discovery and disease biology beyond a single target, and being able to parallelize and swap those stages around, I think that's where AI and clever approaches can really change the drug discovery process and shorten the timelines. And so, for example, what we do, our lead program is in neurofibromatosis type 1. We started in 2019. We have a first-in-class mechanism. We didn't start in a target-based approach. We used multi-omic analysis to design kind of complex disease signatures. Then we have that's the digital biology team. Then we have a digital chemistry team that helps us predict small molecules that work on that biology based on complex patterns. And then when we see basically patterns emerging across different data types, we go straight to the most relevant preclinical model that we can find. So we go to mice model, we see what works, and then we work backwards on how it works. And I think that's really different as an approach. It allows us to skip a lot of steps, and so we do then a lot of biology deconvolution at the end. And now what phase 2 and potentially would be really a paradigm shift for those patient populations. So right now, the only available treatment, it's kind of a rare nerve cancer. And the only available treatments are MEK inhibitors, so kinase inhibitors with significant side effects. And potentially we are actually the only company with a different mode of action and mechanism for that disease, and potentially a very safe drug that has anti-tumor, anti-cancer properties. And so for those patients, that would be like a real breakthrough. And so if you ask the so what around AI drug discovery, and I know here we're amongst the converted, yeah, this is it, right? So you don't have to do just your Me Too drug on the same target that everyone else, following the same process as everyone else. I think there's a real opportunity to change things. And of course, some of it won't work, but some of it, I believe, will lead to real breakthroughs.
Thank you. Would some of the other panelists like to build on that general question before we move to the next?
Maybe
Ladies first. Elsie, you go and Rodrigo afterwards. Yeah.
I think I bring a bit of a different angle to this because, let's say, I come from a company called Algorithmiq. We're a company developing software for life sciences, but quantum software. So, and an emerging technology, which is quantum computing. And basically, okay, my background, I am a scientist, let's say, theoretical quantum physicist from background, and did a long career in science. And now at Algorithmiq, let's say, I've been growing with the company, and actually my current role is to find where actually those algorithms can make a difference. So when we go to other sciences, life sciences, chemistry, materials discovery, so where can we actually make a difference with those algorithms that quantum computers are good at? And it's a very exciting time for quantum computing because it's an emerging technology, and we're only at the basically moment of time where we are able to start performing better than classical algorithms can for certain problems. So it's an exciting time to start exploring around and go and see, okay, where does this actually make a difference? And when it comes to drug discovery, well, if you look at data where drug discovery or where drugs typically fail, it's typically at phases 2, 3. So when you start going to humans. So it's like, typically you might have a drug that, you have identified a target, you find something that has a very good binding affinity to it, then you take it in vitro, works well, you take it to animal models, works well, even toxicity looks good. But then when you take it to humans, you just notice that the efficacy is not sufficient. That's typically where you struggle. So you can't get the effects that you wanted. And perhaps you even bind. So it's like you have your target, you bind to it, but somehow along the line, the, let's say, downstream biology is complex, and in the end, you get interference from other mechanisms. You have some other processes that come into play and take over, and your body actually adjusts to whatever you're doing, and in the end, you don't get the effects that you wanted, even if you're binding to it. And I think quantum computing, if you look at the big picture, where it's really good at is in simulating nature and life on the ultimate level of really the quantum level. And in the human body, it's surprising actually how many of the fundamental mechanisms that govern how our body and life works overall actually boil down to really fine-tuned quantum level phenomena. And somehow what I think the paradigm shift of quantum computing in drug discovery could be that we go beyond like, okay, we have a target and we bind to it and we hope that the downstream biology works out. But in the end, that you could actually engineer your drugs from the beginning to actually really work on that fine-tuned quantum level. And if you would have the simulation capabilities for doing that, that's where I believe the biggest impact really could be. But it's a bit more like a paradigm shift. It's not just that, okay, we're going to make this and this process computation faster, but it's really like maybe designing the drugs from the beginning with a different mindset.
Excellent. Thank you. Rodrigo, you wanted to go as well.
I don't know if I can add very much to that.
I'm sure you will.
So Rodrigo, CTO at Owkin, we have a vision of that AI will help us deal with the kind of unfathomable complexity of biology. Today, what that means is working across a number of steps in early stage of discovery and development. I guess what keeps us busy and where we think the AI is having an impact is both at the tool level, and you've heard some great tools here, but also at the amplifying the workflow level, amplifying access to the capabilities of software to research scientists and developers who maybe don't have, where having expertise in bioinformatics or having expertise is hard to find within an organization, so you can move faster with your science. I look at this more from a technology than a science perspective, but definitely see that amplification at play. So maybe that's the thing to take away from that.
Excellent.
Maybe to also add a bit to some of the points that we heard. I'm Gerit, Director for Digital Chemistry at Merck Group. So I think my commute here was the best from all of us. So I just walked over from our beautiful neighboring office. I'm a physicist by training, so I was telling people I'm a scientist at heart. So I really care about our technology, and I think we are really far in our digital technologies, and that's awesome, and that's great. But as a physicist, so for me, everything is very clean and easy and simplified. And then we already heard biology is complex and is noisy. And we already heard, there are kind of different stages where we look at different parts of a development cycle, and we do some great speed ups that we heard. We can be a bit faster, but I want to bring in the point that's great. But in the end, I'm not sure if our patients care that much that my simulation was a bit faster. So we really, and also as a field and community, we have to focus a bit on what do we actually deliver for our patients in the end. We need to deliver drugs faster that are more safe, that really help them in the end. So I think that's, and also for myself, that's kind of a bit of a change of working, and not just in my field, it's a cool technology, but what impact do we actually have and get out of that? And there's no easy solution how to get that, but I want to change a bit because of not just being a bit faster in what we anyway do, but really, really making a difference and have kind of this viewpoint as a customer.
Thank you, Gerit. So you guys covered a lot of ground already. So I mean, speed is something that definitely came up a couple times. Reliability as well. So maybe two questions into one. From, I would say, traditional drug processes, what are the most significant bottlenecks that we currently see that you think, in your perspective, might be lifted? Whether at what your organizations are contributing or in general in the industry. And the other side, which you also touched on, is biology. So how do we balance the promise of AI with the inherent uncertainty and complexity of biological systems?
Yeah, I can add to the last point a bit that We have some promises of new compute resources, both classically and some modern ways of doing simulations at a different scale, and that's great. So we should go with our simulations from a small molecule in vacuum to something more realistically representing biology. But even with those technologies in a couple of years, I think we still very crucially need the actual biological experiments. We need this input, and we need to do those simulations, but we need to connect that to the actual measurement that we do. And that will stay crucial, and we might be getting there faster, and we might be from my point of view, typically the better your in silico simulated data represent your reality, learning then the rest with some clever algorithms gets easier the more realistic your input model already is. And that's the way how to process that a bit, and that might be going a bit over to
it's in the direction
yeah.
what I was thinking. Like it's just stimulated the thought in my head exactly that I think the real impact to the bottlenecks comes from the interface of all these technologies. Really, the fact that you can maybe do one part of it faster, but you can't do it unless you have accurate data of this and that, and okay, good simulations, but at the same time you have the capabilities of coupling that with experiments and relevant experiments, and I think like to have, for example, also the complex system understanding of human body, that how things interplay, and also that we're all individuals and every system is a bit different, and how the mechanisms are fine-tuned differently to every individual, or for example in animal models and humans, and there are huge differences there, and they're fine-tuned in a different way to a different environment and so on, and I think it's that interplay that will be crucial. And it's not just the interplay of the models, but the different players in the field as well. I think it really boils down to having, let's say, the biotechs, tech bios, academics, big industries, all kind of pushing together in order to bring that impact into reality. And I think there, like the fact that people are talking and collaborating from different backgrounds, it's like brings so much more than everybody working in their silo, in their, and doing their niche and not talking to the others. And that's really where you need to like try to bring the impact of what you're doing to the community and see where it actually plays a role.
So maybe if I can add to that. So a couple of things that we know are bottlenecks or challenges. One of them is recruitment. If you want to do a clinical trial, and is it ethical to try some drugs? So one of the benefits we have from working, we have a network of hospitals and clinics and academic medical centers that we work with. I think it has two benefits. One of them is it helps to maybe have synthetic control arms if you have a trial, so you can get something that's statistically useful without necessarily having the ethical dilemma. But also at the same time, you're raising the bar and quality of the upstream data in terms of, for example, with our Mosaic program, having a range of data modalities that normally maybe are more cutting edge, like spatial omics, or maybe the clinics have pathology, but they don't do certain types of omics. So industry academic collaborations that give the community much better range of data to start with, establish those relationships and of collaboration that Elsie mentioned. But then later on, that means that you can go back and say, okay, we could maybe do a synthetic control arm for our trial because we know the patients. We have a much better idea of the patient population. Also, I guess there are all sorts of questions about whether the data we work with routinely are unbiased or representative of a global population, or are we just stuck in Europe and America? So those relationships, those collaborations are super important.
Yeah, Elise, you wanted to go?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I talk about data? I can talk about data all day long because I think it is one of the biggest bottlenecks now in successfully implementing generative AI approaches in our case, large molecule discovery and development. I mean, the paradigm shift for the protein engineering field, I think, or one of the paradigm shifts was really the advance of large language models, where you now have like ChatGPT trained on not the internet and human language, but like ChatGPT trained on protein language, which is amazing because what it means is that this starting model may not be able to answer every question out of the box. In fact, we don't think, or we think that is rarely going to be the case currently, but that you need much less data to help that model understand the specific problem that you're trying to solve, which is the protein that you're trying to design for a very specific target product profile. Then the question is, how much data do you need to feed into this model to fine-tune it and like help it understand the problem and how to solve it? And what we're currently seeing is that actually lies at like a 96 well plate, a 384 well plate. There's exceptions, but like at a throughput that many labs can actually generate. And then you get this interplay between machine learning engineers and biologists, where machine learning engineers call it machine learning with a lab in the loop, and the biologists call it experimentation with ML in the loop. But the important thing is that everyone is in the same loop working together. And their data is still the bottleneck, but you can generate it in smaller batches to meaningfully update the understanding of the model. And what we're seeing at Cradle in developing the software platform that allows these different users to work together in that same loop is that the important thing is to understand what are the nuances in how you collect the data and the quality of data and in how you establish your internal controls that make sure that the models are learning the right things and extracting the right insights from these data as you're running experiments. That's what I think is so exciting about the field now, is that you're really, I think for the first time, we have this meaningful opportunity to bring these different types of researchers together to solve problems in a different way. And that's just like, yeah, it's really exciting.
So Elise, on what you just shared, and maybe also for the others, what's the biggest challenge? Is data quality? Is it standardization of data? I mean, can you elaborate on that, and maybe the other speakers as well?
Well, I mean, I think largely data is still going to be scarce because it's costly, it's time-consuming, it's laborious to run validation in the wet lab. Now, if you ask ChatGPT a question, you can fact-check its answer by a Google search. And in biology, it means you have to go into the wet lab, and that takes 8 to 12 weeks, sometimes much, much longer. So you want to have very high levels of confidence that the hypotheses that you're going into the lab to test are worthwhile testing. And so you want to know, do I have a shot of actually improving? And do I have a shot at improving the understanding of the model of the problem that I'm trying to solve? And there it is both quantity as well as the iteration cycle. Like it doesn't work to update the understanding of your model once a year, because then you're only going to learn at like 1-year iterations, right? So it's much better to iterate a little bit more quickly with smaller data sets. And if you have very noisy data, then the model is also going to learn that noise, and it's like it might get there eventually, but it is still, even in the world of AI, like AI is not a cheat code for poor data quality. Data quality is still extremely important, and I think that's where you can also, these different user types can help each other look at data and go, is the quality sufficient? Is the predictive accuracy of our models decent? And are they benefiting from the data that's being collected by all these hours in the wet lab?
Tim, you want to go?
Yeah, thank you for that. And maybe to add a perspective of the rare disease world. So for us, data availability and data gaps and models that are not perfect is even bigger. And so what we had to do is you have 10,000 rare diseases, 95% don't have an approved treatment. And so how do you start selecting, right? So we had to develop algorithms to start ranking the rare diseases based on data availability, data gaps, models, validated endpoints, etc. And so you start predicting probability of success and translational ability to the clinic within a large space. And so that's how we selected where to work on. And then we would go a level deeper. And so you brought in the human element and the patient element. So for us, the reason I started the company was after meeting a rare disease parent who basically had 2 children with an ultra-rare disease. He was told there is no treatments available, that he should enjoy the next couple of years with his kids. And he didn't take no for an answer. So he went on a mission to try and find a treatment. He's not a scientist, set up a foundation, then identified that a weed killer was actually working. I think it was actually even developed by Merck, potentially, working on the same enzyme in plants that his kids had this very rare mutation. Long story short, he managed to get that drug approved by the EMA with less than a $10 million budget, which is like unheard of. And so for me, when I met him, he's called Nick Siro, I realized first that he's not alone. You have lots of rare diseases, but also how important the champions, the patient foundation, the charities are in those diseases. And so for us, after we've done all of our data analysis, gap analysis, etc., we work with the foundations to help bridge the data gaps, give us the most valuable information that we need. And for example, for NF1, neurofibromatosis type 1, the patients also said, hey, we know there's kinase inhibitors being developed, but we want something ideally that's also safe for chronic use. And that really changed our angle for the program. And so I think today the challenge is not your algorithms, right? The code is there, the ability to analyze data is there. It's more, and especially in the rare disease space, the quality data that's available. And so for us, our second program, which should have first patient dose by the end of this year, phase 1, that's focused on cancer dormancy and preventing metastatic recurrence, which is actually your biggest problem in cancer. It's not getting rid of your primary tumors, it's the dormant cancer cells that then reactivate and make that your cancer come back months or years later. And so what we're doing in Boston now in a specific lab is generate models of like metastatic recurrence, metastatic outbreaks, cancer dormancy, and then apply a bunch of AI tools to the problem. And there's already a lead candidate entering the clinic, but so the approach is really not just the algorithms, is then investing in a lot of data that's relevant, proprietary, clean, that you can then analyze to find the next generation of breakthroughs. But that takes time, but it's very exciting.
Exciting stuff. So
super cool.
Reliability, data scarcity being tackled. Any other aspects you guys want to touch on? Data, Elsie, please.
Well, maybe just from the quantum computing perspective, that's basically what you try to do in at least certain areas where, let's say, the mechanisms behind whether a drug works are governed by quantum level. That's where you can really, the idea is that quantum computing can actually help you generate that data in a reliable manner. So you don't have to necessarily do it in the lab. Like there are areas, for example, we're working with scientists working in discovering new photosensitizers for photodynamic therapy for cancer. And in that space, for example, really how the molecules function and how efficiently they're able to, let's say, kill the cancer cells through different mechanisms is truly a quantum level phenomena and requires quantum level description. And there, the simulation methods really fail in predicting how good a certain drug will work. And they're very sensitive to environmental, for example, conditions, microenvironments and so on where they're working. And here we, for example, see that being able to do those simulations on the quantum level really will enable you to, without having to go through that cycle all the time in the lab and synthesize the, let's say, candidate molecule and test how well it works and so on. But if you could do that loop much more on your computer, it would really take a load off from the lab in that case, which is very expensive and time consuming as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I think augmenting with simulated data is definitely something we should do. It's let's say, a cost versus insight balance, and I think one should go both routes. Maybe a bit connected to what we heard also before from Elise and Tim on the data that we generate, and we are all, I know that and appreciate we are for-profit organizations, so we care about our own data, we generate our own data, but I think as a community, especially in areas where there's very scarcity of data, we also need to think about how can we share which type of data as a community for certain areas where we can actually accelerate our models. Like a good example is the PDB database, where a lot of people from the community kind of put in their curated protein structures, and that was the basis to generate models like AlphaFold 3, Bols 2, whatever type of protein structure prediction model you want to use. And I think there is a value as a community to contribute to that and still have your own for-profit contribution in your space. But it's a tricky setup how to combine that.
So I'm jumping the queue here. That's exactly, we had the same. So we started a company in Cambridge. We were kind of the first to do something about rare diseases. And then within a year, I had so many people contact us, academics, other startups, parents who have children with rare diseases, etc. And so we then set up a charity that's separate from the company, the Cambridge Rare Disease Network, to then do the different things. But we really struggled with that. And so we ended up setting up 2 organizations. And then my board were like, hey, team, you need to focus. So please, can you focus on the company and hire someone to run the charity? And so, of course, you listen to your board and investors. And so I stayed focused.
Yeah.
Maybe just to add to that, I mean, there's a kind of PDB or these kind of scientific data sets, but there are also quite a lot of efforts in rare diseases, in Alzheimer's, to create kind of international platforms for data sharing. And it's still too hard to federate and integrate data. But I think there are some interesting platforms out there and sometimes it's not about the data itself, it's also about the community of connecting either a group of patients or a group of clinics who are operating in that niche or that interest.
Or benchmarks, like aside from data sets to train on, how do you evaluate these different methods, especially at the breakneck speed that the academic world is moving at now? And this is something that we hear from a lot of the customers that we work with as well, is that like every week they're seeing new publications and they're like, how do we know what's real? Because you don't have the capacity or the resources to compare all of these approaches side by side. And that's where having appropriately designed benchmark data sets can be super, super valuable, so that at least you can run evaluations and compare. Yeah. But also competitions, so in the protein design space, for example, Aligned to Innovate, an initiative, nonprofit initiative, also ran a protein design challenge where they would also actually synthesize these proteins that were submitted by different participants in the lab. And these types of initiatives, I do think, are extremely valuable to kind of separate signal from noise.
Maybe just to add to that, as someone who's worked in software a long time, I think the last year or two has changed completely about how you test. I mean, LLMs and generative AI is stochastic, and so you have to kind of take a different approach. But the other thing that's changed is just the range of use cases you have to support or benchmark against. So traditionally, if you're building software in this field, you might have testers, you might have dedicated testers, you might ask your developers to test. Now you have to have a whole, and like we do, we have a whole team of data scientists assembling and developing our own benchmarks and evaluations across a whole range of things we want to play in. I think that's a real change in the field, and a good one as well, because you can't do these yourself. There's a lot more communication around what your benchmarks should be. You end up being part of a community, but across multiple tasks. It could be alignment and ethics, or it could be a very specific scientific task that you have to benchmark against and evaluate. So it's not obvious. Like for a lot of people using the tools, it's probably not something that's very visible to them. But anybody working in kind of software in this field will have had to retool and reorganize around this topic. Yeah.
Excellent. So you touched on the topic of ethics. So I want to jump right in. I mean, obviously, when we go to the general public, there's a lot of conversation. I mean, just in the public space right now around AI and ethics. Mm-hmm. It touches a lot of things. So obviously, our industry wouldn't be immune to that. So what ethical implications of AI drug discovery, data privacy, algorithmic bias, equitable access to treatments, maybe others, do you see in your respective areas?
All of them.
All of them? Okay. Do you want to go a little deeper on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to kind of address all those questions. Is there a bias in our data? Is there a bias in our application? Are we developing this ethically? Is the trade-off with the partners who share data with us and the benefit we get as an organization a fair one? Then there's the whole question of, is what you're building substituting jobs or amplifying existing jobs, or so there's a lot to work through there.
Yeah, exactly. Tim, please.
I just want to add a slightly different perspective here. I think we should be proud. We're one of the few fields where we're doing AI to do something good, inventing drugs, treating people, and so I want to high five everyone here in the room who's working on that. And of course, you need to take into account ethics and make sure but you can use AI to start generating the data samples that you may not have and that are maybe all privileged white male like myself. And so I think there's great opportunities there. And I think particularly for us, we're in a field where we're doing something really good in the world using AI. So I just wanted to.
I love that. This will be in the highlights video.
Yeah, especially Merck.
Anyone else?
Warm and fuzzy inside, yeah.
Let's flood that. Anyone else want to add to the ethical aspect of things?
It's a tough question, but I agree that in this realm we are on the good side of using AI. And I think what we can do is to try to be as transparent to what we are doing as possible, and don't just describe your model as it's a black box and just trust whatever comes out of that. That's of course not the way to move forward, but to be as transparent what we are doing, what possible data biases we have in there, and then try to deal with that. Because of course we talked already about biases that we have today in our clinical trial groups. And of course, if I would let a GPT-3 model design a clinical trial group, probably it would just represent those biases. So one needs to properly rethink of what type of these biases we have and how to compensate them. But I think it gives us additional tools to actually be more ethical in what we do. It's as always, how are you using your tool that you have, and follow ethical guidelines with that, of course.
Love this. Another adjacent aspect is the regulatory environment that we operate in, which is, of course, very high compared to other industries. So what are the key regulatory considerations and challenges or opportunities that you see while incorporating AI into drug discovery pipelines?
I have a quick answer to that because I am in a comfortable position as part of our technology office, more an innovation department, that this is a challenge for quite a couple of my colleagues out there, and not mine. It is a challenge, but to be honest, I don't have a good answer to that. But I have a lot of capable colleagues here who can go into.
We'll call them out. Someone else.
I think I'm interested to see how this develops, and I'm not a regulator myself, but. Identifying the places in which we've designed regulation around the old paradigm of, in this case, molecule design. So I think when you think about evaluating the safety of a potential protein therapeutic, you could look at where did it come from? Was it found in a human originally, or was it found in a mouse? And if so, which steps did we do to engineer it so that it's more like what we might see in a human body to prevent, for example, unwanted immunogenicity effects. Now, some of that logic might break if a generative AI method was used in that discovery. And so I think it gives us an opportunity, or I hope we can use it as an opportunity to go back and maybe think first principles, like what is it that we're trying to prevent or that we're trying to aim for, and how can we develop the regulatory system such that we screen for the outcomes that we want rather than maybe relying on the method. And it's something very practical that I ran into as we were building out our in-house wet lab in the Netherlands, where when applying for a permit to do GMO work in our lab, one of the questions is, what is the protein that you're working with? What is the organism that you're expressing with? And the protein that you're going to be working with, what organism did it come from? And it's like, well, I can no longer answer that question because technically it didn't come from an organism. It's based on a natural occurring sequence, but then generative AI proposed a variation on it. And that's just a form that the government provides me with that like breaks.
How did you solve that?
So I solved it by saying, well, in our research, this is the expected diversity around the natural starting sequence that we expect to be working with. Like, is that okay with you? But I also raised it with the authorities, saying like, hey, look, we're not going to be the only ones who are using these technologies, so we have to update this framework. And it did start like a kind of a refresh on how to think about, in this case, the biosecurity aspect of the workflow, which is exciting.
Maybe to add to that, I think we have a very good regulatory director in the company, and I think for us, it's almost in the preclinical stage, it doesn't really matter how much AI and how you use it. At the end, it's the same IND package that you have to submit to the regulators. And so, and then after that, whenever I go back to the clinical team and I say, hey, could we add this to the clinical design or do that? The answer is always no. we basically know we've submitted the clinical plan, the FDA agreed it, and so there's no changes to it. Those other endpoints, and I'm just like, come on, do we have to wait every 4 months so that they also report neuropathic pain? Surely they can do this every week or via an app or whatever. No.
What are the changes you'd like to make?
So I think the way the patient-reported outcomes are done, let's say in a clinical trial, I mean, with current technologies, is like super easy. You should almost have daily updates, but because the way the regulatory process works, and I think that's one of the major bottlenecks, and it has to be led by the regulators, because at least as a CEO of a clinical stage biotech now, I feel there's very little room. You have to follow the regulatory procedures, and that is your bottleneck for time, cost, etc. Doing adaptive clinical trials, trying more umbrella trials, or when there's a number of designs that would be incredibly helpful, which are very difficult to implement. But there's a big opportunity there. And I think there's, in the rare disease space, already a lot of good stuff happening and additional advantages from a regulatory perspective. But I think that's where, unless the regulators kind of lead that, you don't have a lot of innovation possible.
Do you see this happening? I mean, do you see more agility coming in this space in the coming years?
Yeah, I think the people at the FDA that have not yet been fired by the Trump administration.
No politics, please.
I think mean well, want to help patients, get drugs to patients, and we see this in the rare disease space. But I think it's hard, and they need to catch up with the pace of AI improvements and evolution at a speed that has never been seen before. And so everyone is trying to follow the AI wave, including the regulators. And I would say right now it seems like they don't really know what to do with it yet. But that will hopefully change soon.
Excellent. Our other two speakers, anything you wanted to add? Rodrigo?
Yep.
Okay. Elsie? Okay, perfect. I want to take a short break here and look at the room, and I want to see if there are questions that some of you would like to ask to our panelists. I see a first hand over here. Ladies are grabbing the microphones as we speak. So, yes, so we'd love to know your name, who you are, your affiliation, what organization you work for, and please ask your question to the panelists.
Friedrich Rippmann, former head of drug design here at Merck, 2 years in the organization, now a consultant. I want to ask Tim, how was your weed killer discovered, and is it understood how it works? And is it sort of a typical story, or is it just serendipity?
No, it's so that was discovered by this rare disease parent who, without AI, tried to understand if there was anything available that would bind to his kid's rare mutation enzyme, and then found this molecule called nitisinone, and then it took quite a long time, but was incredibly successful, and so. But that's an area where we can really improve the process very fast. In rare diseases, most don't have an approved treatment, and so you don't need to manually now go through a lot of literature, go to conferences to find a potential compound that's already available that could help a rare disease that has no commercial potential. That's the reality. 95% of rare diseases, 90% don't have a commercial potential, and unless the pharma company or biotech who sits on a potential drug that could help makes it available, it becomes very hard. But everyone played ball, and I think it was a fantastic success story. Excellent. There was no AI involved.
Thank you very much for your question. I will scan the room for another question. Please raise your hand. I see a hand in the back.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Karin Hravatin. I'm a researcher in biological data sciences, and I switched to Merck approximately a year ago from academia. So I would like to use this opportunity to learn from you with a more open-ended question. So if you started your company or your product again from scratch, what would be the one thing you would have done differently in this process?
Great question.
Can we have an easier question?
You can have a bit of time and someone else can start before you, unless you want to go first.
So, yeah, I'll go.
Okay, you go.
My background is actually not drug discovery. Right? I was doing my PhD, I had the idea for the company, and then we started. And I think what you think will be applicable from the tech industry to the biotech industry, we made big mistakes. And so at some point we had a technology team, an engineering team, a product design team, a UX UI team, and a whole bunch of people there. And then we had the drug discovery team that was separate. And then the amount of time wasted in communication between the UX, UI, and the pharmacologist and trying to design tools. Basically, at some point, I fired the entire UX, UI engineering team. We made cross-functional team who were basically behind the project, NF1, and they figure it out, come up with new mechanism, new algorithms to work on that particular project. And so I think for us, if I could go back, trying to not follow the tech-based mindsets blindly and apply it to drug discovery. Well, every tech company has a product team, but your product in biotech is your drug. That's it. The rest is secondary. You don't need, but if you sell software, that's very different. Then you need a product engineering team. But that was one of the biggest mistakes we made, was just borrowing from tech and think, oh, that's going to be very useful in biotech. And yeah, we lost some time, but learned.
Thank you for sharing so openly. Who would like to go next?
Well, maybe my version of that is quite similar in that, recently we organizing around cross multidisciplinary teams much more, and not just having software and research teams. But also I'd go a bit further. One thing we is, how do you integrate a lab and the digital processes around a lab into that? I think we're still on that journey. We could have started that much earlier. And I think introducing the digital process and the data and the automation into the lab much more early, I think.
It's a bit of a different technology, but let's say it still comes to the same question of when you work in a field where you have very different kind of background and competencies coming together, and how you actually create something good out of that. We started as a team of people with quantum physics background, and still saying that, okay, we're going to solve problems for pharma without knowing anything about what those problems actually were. And then you have a technology and you try to fit it somehow there. And I think the original idea is kind of like, okay, we hired a lot of chemists to solve our problems in chemistry, and then we say, okay, these chemistry problems are going to solve the problems of the current drug discovery pipelines of pharma. And so you realize that we're not actually solving the problems of the current drug discovery pipeline, but we're actually, it's completely, new paradigm that we should be looking at. And the fact that we would have earlier maybe started looking into those areas, truly not trying to fit the current drug discovery pipeline, but rather start looking for what are the areas actually of drug design where truly the chemistry that we can make an impact on make a big difference.
Thank you for sharing. Elise, would you like to go?
I'm going to be thinking about this question for a little bit after this panel, I think, because it's a really good one. And there are things that I wish we would have known when we started the company 4 years ago, but the reality was generative AI as a term it hadn't even been coined, really, I think, maybe in the fringes that I didn't know about. But generative AI was so new, we didn't know what the potential would be practically in the field of protein design. And so we started really by hypotheses, just testing how do these models learn about data, and do we need property-specific models? We spent a bunch of time investigating that before realizing that, actually they don't learn along the same lines of properties that we as human scientists understand. So I think large parts of how we've the trajectory of how Cradle how Cradle's machine learning was built out was also just like going along with the advances in testing these hypotheses and coming to this platform where we can address many protein engineering challenges if the scientists are able to augment the AI with, or having the AI augment their expertise and their data. I think the one thing that maybe I would have done differently looking back was we are located in 2 offices. And so it also comes down to the team structure. So we in early days did have like people across the 2 sites, and it is really nice to spend time in person. And we've always done off-sites regularly with the entire company, everyone being together in the same room. We also try and spend time with customers in the same room, just because of the bandwidth. It does something when you are in the same room physically together. I think as we're growing the company, we need to think as a global company because our customers are everywhere, the talent is everywhere. And so it's even in early phases where maybe it was a little bit inconvenient to have the 2 offices, I think it did help to set us up as a company in like building that muscle on how to work remotely with customers and talent globally.
Just for everyone's understanding, how far apart are they? Different continents? I mean, what are we
No,
talking
so it's
about?
Zurich and Amsterdam.
Okay.
It's a 1-hour flight or a night train, which runs most of the time. But by now we have also counterparts or colleagues in across the U.S. East Coast, West Coast, and the team will grow because our customers are also everywhere. Yeah.
So you avoid Deutsche Bahn and.
That's another topic we're going to avoid.
Deutsche Bahn took me like 90% of the way today, which was good enough. I got a taxi for the rest.
Thank you all for bravely answering.
Maybe
you
just
wanted
add
to add
one thing, because I think maybe just a very techie point, but if you're making any software, typically you design for users and humans, and I think if I would, and sometimes those humans are low code, sometimes they're API users, and a lot of scientists I know are kind of very good at their own automation. But I think now, thinking about making a product, I'd be designing much more for agents, and the volume that you expect to have, or the range of things you expect to have, is going to be so different in the coming years. So just a level of an order of magnitude of automation that you just didn't have before. So designing for that and investing in that is probably something that is a new thing for people to think about. The other new thing is LLMs bring a lot of things, and they start to eat up what counted as software before as well. So the difference between in-weight learning and in-tool learning, the balance shifts. So you can train an LLM to do more. It starts to eat up what you need to write software for. So those are 2 big dynamics that we're only just starting to see play out in the way we build products and services.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Tim?
No, go ahead.
I just liked how Karin sparked everyone to talk about how to build synergies, how to not build silos kind of within your companies. And that's actually what we are there for at Merck too, to kind of bring synergies, not just within our pharma branch, but also across our Merck businesses. And Uli told you we are 357 years old, so that also comes with its caveats. I think it's something, it's a strong advice to try to don't build silos early on, because it's very tough to bridge them later.
Once we're 370 years old.
Tim, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add a comment on the AI agents. And so we had a workshop already at the beginning of the year where basically the techies in the team set up the infrastructure and tutorials so that every single person in the company can design their own AI agents to help them with their tasks, and even if they cannot code. And so my questions to the team is, okay, how many people do you need in your team? And they all want more people. And then the second question is, okay, how many agents and to do what? And so now we invested so that every single person can develop really easily their own AI agents to kind of help them. And I think at the moment we're about 60 people, which is a small company, and next year we're going to have 3 clinical programs. I think we can do US launch in specialist oncology, so we're in rare pediatric oncology, with maybe 30 to 40 people. And the impact of AI potentially on commercial launch will maybe reduce that number further. And so it means that with a company of about 100 people, we think we can get products to approval and potentially generate a few $1 billion of revenue, right? And so that is a big change, right? If you look at how many 63,000 people you have at Merck, right? And so I think conceptually the world is changing, and you still don't know how much this AI will impact, but within that world, I think, well, we have one medical writer with a bunch of AI tools. We have one regulatory director, and they're very good. But we don't plan to scale massively. And so I think that it's really a change in how you think about the organization, and you think about your employees, but also your AI agent workforce. And ideally for us, it'd be great if we can build a impactful company that helps patients, can generate multi-billion dollars of revenue with 100 to 150 employees. And I think that's, and in some cases, maybe we'll be with even less.
Thank you for sharing. Scanning the room for other questions. We have one here in the front.
Thank you for the great discussion. So my name is Thibaut Géoui. I'm working with Zulke, a consulting and engineering company. So the question I had was, so here I think we are in a room where people believe that AI, will help us make progress in drug discovery and development. Yet, when you discuss, among other people in the industry, not everyone believes that. There was a paper, I think, in 2023 that looked at how many compound, like what is a pipeline coming out of AI platform, and in 2023 I think it was 160 compounds. So today it might be 3 or 4 times more, but it's still a fraction of a percent compared to what the industry produces using traditional techniques. So there is a lot of skepticism. We don't have yet a lot of compound coming from AI platform that reaches phase 2, phase 3, or are even marketed. So how do you address the skepticism? What's your approach, to convince people? Okay, AI is a tool. It's a new tool. It's potentially a powerful and revolutionary tool, and you need to give it a chance.
I can do what Gerit did the other day, earlier, and say I can bypass the answer to that by saying we don't focus on the discovery part, the compound discovery. So we're not worried about that metric.
That's a good thing. So for me, I think an important point is that if a drug for a patient is AI generated or human generated, I don't care. In the end. So for me, it's really, and that was also one of my earlier points, that I like technology, right? And yes, we want to help with our technology. But if it was now an AI drug or not an AI drug, it's even tough to make that label and make the cut which type of tooling that we've used for decades now in the industry, when is the kind of border to call it AI or not AI, right? Machine learning has been around for quite some time.
The point is the impact isn't just on drug design and the chemistry. I mean, I know that there's a whole industry there, but the impact of AI isn't so. Maybe it's harder to explain in other parts of the industry, but it's definitely there. And we see. I mean, Tim just mentioned some aspects. We focus on others, but. Yeah, I think it's...
Yeah, and you as a company, of course, exist because it apparently has an impact, and the same for us as an organization or team at Merck, because we actually help our colleagues, and we actually bring value in what they are doing. So it's not enough to kind of label something with it's a great technology, but to actually change and show how you help them in terms of finding new drugs, solving their challenges, and we're doing that. We're doing that every year. We are working on that day over day, so I think there are those proof points internally. And if it's then an AI drug on the market or not, yeah.
Somehow, skepticism will always be there as long as there are any technologies. I don't think there's any technology which wouldn't face that. But at the same time, the proof is in the pudding. In the end, you're gonna, when you show that you create some impact, that's when people start adjusting, and then they don't question anymore at some point, and then they will question the new technology that comes. It's kind of sometimes you just need to, especially when new technologies are emerging and you don't have that proof yet. You can just say, okay, there's potential. But it's just potential, and there is no proof yet. It's very difficult to convince that, okay, quantum computing is one of these, definitely, because, even the hardware is under development, and there are big promises on its scaling, but, like, before you actually see it, nobody's going to,
And it's also, I think, different in the type of setup. So at Merck, I don't need to convince investors that my team is doing a good job, but kind of our executives that they stick around with us and maybe even grow our responsibility. Of course, talking to investors, so that's more your side, might be slightly different. So there, I can see one also needs to have those kind of lighthouse things that you can point at to showcase that this has an impact.
Yeah, and so thank you for the question. I think in a few years' time, the question will be relevant, but it's very relevant today. Basically, there will be no differentiation. It's going to be integrated, and of course, we're going to use those tools. And I think as founder of a company, this kind of first wave of, but machine learning applied to drug discovery has been done for years, right? But let's say first wave of AI drug discovery companies, yeah, there was some naivety and I think over-optimism on how quickly it would impact the drug discovery timelines, cost, scalability. And then I think, like you said, Gerit, from a patient's perspective, they don't care as long as they have a drug that works. And then, of course, there is, let's say, AI applied to the current process and the current drug discovery paradigm, which is largely target-based. And then I would say it's mostly incremental improvements. Great. You use the AI to predict another drug that binds to the same target that's just a little bit different, and then the skeptics in the room will say, well, I could have done it without AI. My co-founder, who's medicinal chemist, he is a global head of drug discovery at Roche. Famously, he's the co-inventor of Viagra. So when he was at Pfizer, he has the name on the original patent. His level of skepticism on the digital chemistry, he always tells me, like, I can draw this on a napkin myself, the chemical structures. But then the other part is the breakthroughs, not just a me-too molecule on an existing target where there's a lot of data and everybody can fit in algorithms to predict the next one. The real breakthroughs, I think, is kind of novel target, novel biology, something that's so far with a big unmet need. And I would say we have things in the clinic, right? Phase 2 by the end of the year, phase 1 next year, another phase 1. And of course, then we'll have to wait for the clinical results. But those are happening. And actually, and I shouldn't say this, and I won't. But yeah, it matters less whether it's AI generated or not. Like, it's just, do you find real breakthroughs that help patients in need? That's why we're here as an industry. And how you get there actually matters less. But yeah, AI is here to stay, and soon we won't differentiate between the AI companies and the non-AI companies, I believe.
So AI will be the how, not the what. Excellent.
I think, just to comment on that, I do think in like the trajectory towards the clinic, I think we need to be able to shave off zeros of what it costs to bring a drug into clinical trials. And then we're relying on novel target discovery and new modes of action to know what to develop. But developing the molecules that are going to make it into trials needs to be faster and more efficient, so that we can also have more shots on goal, and that we not only increase the efficiency but also the quality of the molecules that are coming out, so that they have a larger chance of making it past that phase 1 and being effective in phase 2. I think in terms of how to address skeptics, we are definitely still in the early adapter phase of the adoption curve. There are still skeptics, and some may need a couple more years to come on board and see where it's really driving value. For us, what's extremely important in engaging with customers is being transparent about the limitations of today's AI technologies as well. Because the more you promise, the more skeptical people get. They're like, that can't be. So it's actually very reassuring if you say this is like we don't think that the state of AI is ready to address the problem that you're throwing our way. Instead, have you thought about approaching it this or that, or maybe abandoning this idea for now until the technology is ready? So being very clear and ultimately showing the science. So we do see that people come on board and start believing in the potential of the technology as they are seeing like material impact in their own research program. And that's a question, like every potential customer asks us that. Like they ask us some form of the question, but will this work for me? And the final proof of that is showing it in a program and comparing it A/B to what was the alternative, or showing that it now unlocks a project that maybe wasn't feasible within the capabilities or the scope or the budget with traditional technologies. Yeah.
Excellent. We're almost at the end of the program, but we still have a couple hands. So I want to take one question here in the front.
Hi, my name is Philipp Schnee. I'm a data and AI Go Global here at Merck. And my question goes into a little bit of a different direction. So we analyzed before that regulatory or regulation is bottleneck in drug discovery. And recently, Albania had its first AI minister. So would it be a possibility to have an AI do regulatory work? Because we learned that regulatory frameworks are stiff, and this could be a bottleneck. And maybe if we can automate these things, would this be a possibility to accelerate drug discovery processes?
I think short term, it conflicts a bit with the trust we want to build. So the regulatory people that we have are a strong part of the trust building in the drugs that we're putting out. So replacing them is probably a tricky piece.
I can see it makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. But I still like your question, Philip. I went for the easy answer and maybe ended up to the rest of the panel.
Well, I think he definitely is the civil servant with the coolest job title, right? Minister of AI or AI Minister is awesome. But yeah, no, I think it's important because it is changing the world, right? We're thinking about capabilities where your reasoning improves exponentially, right? 100x means 3 years ago, it moved in 1 year 100 times. Last year, 100 times. Next year, 100 times. If it doesn't plateau, there's some real societal challenges. And so yeah, I do think that actually within the civil service and government, you do need to take that seriously and very fast. And so to appoint a minister that's going to hopefully have the right background to help with that, I think makes a lot of sense. But it moves so fast that, it would be very hard to regulate. And especially within, I guess, our space, it can do so much good, but also patient safety has to come first, right? So I think it makes sense to take it more slowly, and it's frustrating if you're on the company side because you want to move quicker, and now we had new ideas for the clinical trial design, and the clinical team were like, well, no, it's for the next trial, we can try and change it.
Rodrigo.
I mean, I guess assuming it's going to be incremental rather than a binary swap, I think there's two examples that jump to mind. One of them is, I think the FDA is consulting on what tools they're already building and they would like to extend to kind of speed up parts of their process. And then in the EU, you have with the EU AI office, I think it's called. There's an effort around creating sandboxes for vendors and developers to test their AI products. So both applying AI to speed up the bureaucracy and also speeding up the validation of AI tools themselves. So I think that it's happening, it's just incremental.
Thank you very much. I think we're at the top of the hour, so I want to leave you guys with one last question. If we're meeting again here...
Easy one.
Let's say you can get to dream. Let's say we're going to meet again in 5 years. What's your moonshot? What is the big achievement you will have reached in the next 5 years that you want to share with this audience? So you're allowed to dream.
Okay, some breakthrough at different scales of biology. So just everything from the quantum level to the patient level and the trial level. So some LLM that does it all,
Yeah, I would say like a drug with a novel mechanism that uses quantum level phenomena that has been optimized using both AI and quantum data. And it's, let's say, at least in clinical trials.
We'll quote you on that.
No side effects.
No side effects.
No side effects. No, I would say there's a paradigm shift happening right now from, the target-based drug discovery paradigm, which was largely based on the human genome sequence being sequenced, and the naivety there. Hey, we have now sequenced the human genome. Every disease is going to be linked to one gene. That's going to be your potential target, and hooray, hooray, we're going to solve all the diseases, and we're going to invent drugs. And of course, biology is more complicated, but now we have actually tools to understand biology in a much more complex way, multimodal, etc. And I do believe that actually if we had to place a bet, if we see on natural language the impact that foundational models have had, I believe that, with the current technologies, foundational models apply to biology, chemistry, etc., trained on let's say, the language of life, has the biggest potential to transform how we think about drugs, how we think about diseases, and hopefully be able to improve the probability of success, which at the moment in our industry is about 5%. So that would be fantastic if in 10 years' time that's been improved dramatically.
Yep, I'll echo that. I firmly believe that scientists, biologists, chemists can dream very big in this world, and I do think that they need the right tools to be able to realize those dreams. And in 5 years' time, I trust that we will be in a world that scientists will feel generally like their work is more efficient and more successful, and they can dream bigger, like take bolder bets with the help of AI technologies. And that's what we're building Cradle for, yeah.
I can relate a lot to your dream, Elise. I think in 5 years, so my dream would be I have to get back to the patients that we have, let's say, personalized medicines in an affordable manner, and hopefully we helped getting there. So that would be
Perfect
awesome.
closing remarks. Let's give our speakers a warm round of applause.